So I think there are two main things to think about when you're engaging with policymakers. One is that the questions that they have may not be the ones that you think of. They may not be as scientifically interesting as the questions that you would come up with. But of course, that's the point. We're not always focused on the most scientifically interesting questions because what policymakers need is evidence that can help them develop and deploy public health policies. So that's one fundamental difference that you just need to be comfortable with. And the other is that the timescales over which policy is developed and the timescales over which academic research normally plays out are very different. So academic research is usually a relatively slow process where you consider the scientific question, you develop the study design, you collect the data, you analyze the data, you interpret the data, and so on. And that can take months or even years, whereas policymakers need answers much more rapidly. And that's fine if it's a question of synthesizing existing evidence and providing a summary of that to the policymaker. But if you have to generate new data, you do have to be quite agile and prepared to divert resources to focus on that question that's been put to you so that you can answer it within the timescale that is meaningful to policymakers. So working with policymakers, being involved in policy relevant research is ultimately just a different challenge. As an academic who's grown up in a sort of fairly traditional way, developing scientific questions and exploring them and unpacking them and kicking the tires of your assumptions and so on as you go, it's a very different way of working. And what I like about it is, first of all, exactly that it is different. It sort of challenges my established ways of working, my assumptions about what research should look like, and asks me to do things differently in a way that I found quite stimulating and quite interesting. But of course, it's also deploying our resources and our expertise in a way that has potentially a much more direct impact on the wider world by feeding directly into those that are making the policies that can improve public health. So I certainly wouldn't want to solely do this kind of research, but it's added quite a rich additional dimension to our program of activity in a way that has generated some useful insights that hopefully will be used by policymakers, but has also allowed us access to a world that a lot of academics don't have much direct access to see how things are done differently and what the pros and cons of those different approaches are. So I think when it comes to researchers developing the skills they need to work in this kind of way, the first thing to say is this won't be for everybody. People that are doing really fundamental discovery research are probably not doing research that is of direct relevance to policymakers. It might be, and it might be in some specific instances, but I don't think we should be requiring everybody to work in these kinds of ways, but we should be raising the profile of the opportunities that exist so that those who are interested in it, who are doing relevant research, can make sure that they engage. And there are a variety of different ways in which you can develop an understanding of that world through pairing schemes that exist, for example, through the Royal Society and other organisations, through secondments to the Parliamentary Office for Science and Technology, through connections that you can make, in some cases through other academics, with people working in, for example, OHID and other government departments. Different government departments will have the research questions that are their current priority on their websites. So it's really a matter of going out there, looking for the opportunities, engaging with those and seeing what comes from them.